um, early evening to those of you on the East Coast of the U.S. Very good evening to a few of you in Europe that I know are going to tune into this. You're religiously here every week when it's on a Friday night. And I don't know why you're giving me a little bit of your Friday night, but it's great to. It's always great to have you, even if it's for a little while. So thank you, and good day to everybody else in North America. And for those of you watching on the replay, with a very heavy audience in Asia, I I really appreciate your tuning in, and my commitment to you is that you'll learn something new that you can't pick up elsewhere. And my special guest today, we're going to kind of get into. Um, the topic of leadership, culture, a lot of stuff where my guest has a extensive experience working across different cultures as well. We'll talk about that when times are turbulent. So I think we all know that when things are static, it's a bit easier to get the jobs done, whether you're a leader or an individual contributor. But when the ground starts to shake and you get those earthquakes. I know I'll have a few friends in Japan that see this on replay. Tokyo had an earthquake yesterday, Japan time. Unfortunately, it was minor, but I've been there when that ground starts shaking, and it's right on that big fault line. And so I thank God that everybody's okay and that it wasn't did not turn out to be a catastrophe. But at any rate, earthquakes in business, in life, they happen all the time, whether it's a real earthquake or a COVID-19 shock to the system, or any or the global financial crisis, the Asian financial crisis, the 9/11 aftermath. All of these things. Um, I'm kind of paraphrasing with earthquakes that they happen, and that's just life. And so it's really, how do we adapt in that environment, and most importantly, how do leaders lead? And we're going to talk a bit about critical thinking and how that can be applied when the ground is moving, basically. So we'll kind of get into that little bit deeper in a while. But my special guest is coming to us live from North Dallas, Texas, in the United States, and it's Rhonda Williams is here. Rhonda, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Brett. I am excited to be here with you and really, really looking forward to diving into this conversation.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I'm just going to toot your horn for a little bit, and kind of give the viewers a chance, from my perspective, to know a little bit about you, and then I'll have you fill in any color on that is that you deem appropriate as well. But Rhonda is a master coach, an international speaker and author, and if you follow her, which I really recommend you do, you're going to see that she's a real jet setter. So one day she'll be in Central America, and the next day she'll be elsewhere, and she's on the ground working with teams. Okay, and I think that that's very important. So she doesn't sit in an office and advise people over video and telephone only. Sure, there's some of that, but she's actually on the ground with people, engaging, leading, putting together programs, exercises to actually embed a lot of the things that we're going to talk about on this program as well. So you're dealing with a very hands-on person that's a real jet setter, and understands how different cultures operate. She's recently, Rhonda, I'll let you talk about it more later, but I know just from memory, you've been to recently Colombia, other parts of Central America, and I have a hard time keeping up with wherever you are, because you're always on the road, and I think that's great, and because it also shows that you put the client at the center of everything you do by making the personal sacrifice to actually be there with them. And I think that's really wonderful as well. And 2 decades of leadership experience. And now she uses a lot of a big emphasis on emotional intelligence that she picked up through those 2 decades
Yes.
to help leaders define kind of a set of actions that will put them on the right path and help them foster the right culture where people can be happy. They understand the importance of caring for themselves as well, because it is a marathon after all, not a sprint.
Mhm.
Higher productivity, higher success, and all of this, when you add it up, leads to profits. And one of the things that Rhonda and I um, are completely aligned with, and we hit it off well when we first met, I guess more than a year ago, was that putting people before profits is the way to generate profits. And, if you look at the Great Resignation and the root causes of that, it was the opposite of that. It was where a
Mhm.
lot of companies were putting profits first, and it's a little bit counterintuitive when you start to analyze it, but a philosophy of corporate shareholder first before people that really became popular back in the 1970s has fostered a profits before people culture. And when the pandemic hit, it just accelerated all of the problems that were already kind of festering beneath the surface, that it all started to rise
Mhm.
to the top, and it really accelerated quite a bit. So you're talking to two people today. Please engage with us. We believe in the opposite of that, which is people before profits, and that there's many things that you can do, especially during turbulence, to generate more sustainable long-term profits. And that's really, I think, something that I know that the owners of companies, the shareholders, they want to do that. And they're willing to sacrifice a little bit of volatility in the short term for that greater predictability in the long term. Rhonda believes that hope is not a strategy, and desired manifestations show up in our lives when we gain clarity, courage, and consistency. So we'll talk about that. A lot of discipline is so important in all of this. And she has a double master's degree in nursing and business administration. And her professional experience includes executive level roles as a chief nursing officer and hospital CEO. So she understands healthcare very well. And those of you that know me know that my wife and I did full 24/7 caretaking family for between 7 and 10 years. My wife longer than I did, but I was there for most of that journey as well. And so I have the highest respect for anybody working in
Yeah.
healthcare, because it's not an easy job to do, and you don't really ever go on break, even though you do have to find ways to take care of yourself, because you never know what's going to hit next as well. So nothing but respect in that regard. And Rhonda also is a big advocate and champion for helping women of color ascend to executive, C-suite, and board level roles. It's no secret that a couple of my life mentors um, are people of color, man of color, women of color as well. Mainly, let's see, dating back in the U.S. To my time in the U.S. and then later in Africa. And so I'm a big supporter of that as well. And I wanted to elevate Rhonda on this program and the work that she's doing in that space. So if you'd like to know more about that, then please do engage with us in that regard as well. And she's also spent more than 10 years working with global organizations to develop and transform culture. And that's really going to be the main area of focus that we go through today. And Rhonda is currently the CEO and Chief Vision Officer of Above the Grind. And she's also the host of the Coffee with Rhonda show, something you should tune into, because she brings people similar to this program from around the world with a diverse experience. And she's got a couple of partners on there with her that are fantastic people. Uh, One of them is from Western Australia, and the other actually works in healthcare caretaking in the United States. And so you've got a diverse group of people that talks to other diverse people as well. And so that's really where you start to pick up the significant gains in learning, is whenever you can engage with people with extensive cross-cultural experience, the gems that are derived from that are just amazing. And I know
Mhm.
that my following, most of the people follow me because I have that. Well, Rhonda has that as well, and I think that it's something that that's very special and not necessarily common with a lot of people on social platforms. So, Rhonda, with that, I'm going to take a sip of my green tea here and welcome you again to the program. Did I leave out anything of significance?
Oh my goodness, Brett. No, so I'm absolutely thrilled to be here talking with you. You really covered the spectrum of what I've done over the course of my career quite nicely to highlight the engagement and interaction and learning and supporting coaching and developing across cultures as well. So now I'm just thrilled to be here and just dive in.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And did you? Just a question that just entered my mind here. If you go back to say your high school days, did you ever think that you'd be doing what you're doing now? Was it a dream that you had then to do what you're doing now, or obviously you had aspirations in the healthcare field as well? But I just kind of curious, did you ever draw up what you're doing now, or how did how
Yeah.
did you wind up here?
Yeah, really interesting, Brett.
Mm.
I could not have imagined myself doing any of this, right? Even when I became a nurse, even that I was not looking to become a nurse, and was actually a bit hesitant about that. I thought, oh, I don't know if I want to do that, right? I don't know if I want to care for people in those most vulnerable spaces and places of their lives. But I did it anyway, right? It's like they say, do it afraid, just move and do it. And it was probably one of the best decisions that I've ever made, because one of the things that came forward for me is recognizing that people want to be cared for, right?
Mm.
People, we're all, at the end of the day, we're all just
Yep.
people, right? We're human beings. And there is a common element that runs through that. And when you can tap in and tune in to the humanity of all of us, then you're on solid ground, right? And so it's
Right.
really important for us to think about the way that we do that. And
Hmm.
more importantly, I've brought that into my leadership work, that element of being human and treating your colleagues and your team members, employees, up, down, laterally across the organization, always going back to the place that we are all humans. We all make mistakes. The question is, how are we going to handle that? And how are you going to lead yourself when that situation arises? So, could not have dreamed in a million years that I would be doing this work that I'm doing today.
I think that's fantastic. Well, that's great. We have a Padre John here, my friend from Ghana, who's here as well. And for those of you that have not connected to Padre, fascinating individual. And if you want to learn a lot about what's going on in Ghana, please contact Padre. All of you that know me know that I'm quite fond of Africa, and every single country and actually every single community within the African, across the African continent is unique and different. It's not the same. They're very very different, and I think that that I encourage whenever I have anybody from that great continent on here to please do connect with them
Yeah.
and and do more than just connect. Talk to them about what's going on the ground. It's amazing what you learn, and it's amazing that a lot of things. I was talking to somebody, Rhonda, a little off topic here, but I was talking to somebody last week from Nigeria, and they were saying, "Oh, it's so corrupt here. We just had our
Mm.
elections, and it wasn't fair and everything." I said, "Hey, let me tell you something. That is Nigeria corrupt? I don't know." But what I do know is that the U.S. is corrupt, and they said the person said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah," and I said it's quite corrupt. And I said the difference is, and the reason why you're surprised at this, and the reason why Nigeria, unfortunately, they have talked about this for decades, the corruption with the um, oil can tend to bring a lot of corruption
Yeah.
to countries and but I said the difference between the U.S. and Nigeria, the only difference, really, at the end of the day, through a corruption lens, is that the U.S. does a much better job at hiding it.
Mhm.
Nigeria,
Yeah.
if they're going to be corrupt, they should probably take some lessons from the U.S. until the U.S. gets gutted out, because it's every bit as corrupt as Nigeria. So it's which is why critical thinking and smart people are able to see, through a lot of the noise and determine something like that. So Nigeria, for those of you in Nigeria seeing this on replay, it's not that bad. So you just have to be able to detect it and then figure out how to deal with it and do whatever you can do to flourish in that environment and educate other people on the proper way to do things. So anyway, Padre, that was a long, you triggered all of that. That was unscripted. Uh, so what a great guest there, Brett. Good work. Yes, I completely agree with you. We have Heather here. Heather's from Toronto. Hi, Heather. Great to have you here. Thank you for taking the time. And Paul Gunn Jr. is here as well. For those of you Paul, thank you for coming in. For those of you that haven't don't follow Paul, do so. And also check out his book. It's an awesome book as well. So it's fantastic that way. And then Padre, thank you. I'm just going to quickly put this comment up here as well, commenting on people before profit at the end of the day, because I think that it's important, if you're going to leave a legacy, to leave an impact on people. And I think that that's one of the big benefits that we have with this. So Rhonda, let's kind of get into the topics here and talk a bit about turbulence, earthquakes. I don't know where that came from earlier, but I was just speaking off the top of my head. But turbulence, volatility, uncertainty, quicksand, whatever you want to call it. I mean, a lot of the countries I know that you've been to, just since I've known you, have are incredibly volatile, right? You want to talk a little bit about some of your experience with volatility?
Yeah, so
Mm.
volatility in the work that we do, right, as leaders, I think is something that um, we should come to expect, right? So I know that many people are looking to do exactly the opposite, right? They don't want volatility, they want stability and certainty. Well, I got to tell you, organizations and companies that have too much stability and certainty go the way of Kmart, right? Or the way of
Mhm.
Blockbuster, or the
Right.
way of, so as leaders, we should know that there's something coming. We don't know what, and we may not know when.
Mhm.
But what we can do is we can practice developing the skill of adaptability, the skill of nimbleness, the skills of critical thinking. Because
Mhm.
then, whenever the situation arises, because we know it's not if, but when, right? Whenever the situation arises, then our team and our leaders have the skill set that they need to be effective in that moment, even without knowing exactly what it is. You can call on those skills during times of need. And it's one of the things that we talk about in my work with organizations is, how do we get our leaders there? Brett, you use this phrase a lot, elite performers, right? How do we get our leaders to function on a regular day-to-day basis as elite leaders? Because I got to tell you, so much of what I hear, that is not happening. And granted, social
Mhm.
media is filled with people who have, a lot of strife and a lot of frustrations, and we hear a lot of that. But it's actually real, right? It's true. We can walk through organizations. I'm sure you and I have both done this, and we can recognize that there's an opportunity there. I don't blame the leaders for not having those skill sets. I look at the organizations and I look at the senior executive teams and I say, what can we do? Doesn't matter what you did before, right? That's all
Mm.
about judgment and pointing fingers. We don't have any time for that. What do we need to do today moving forward to get your team to that elite level so that you can develop what I like to call modern magnetic cultures, right? It's today you want to attract people, talent, the best and the brightest. How are you going to do that with a culture that really isn't up to par and that isn't modernized to what people expect today?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that modern magnetic culture, and I had not really heard it put that way until I met you. And I think that's fantastic, and that's a big value add that you put on. I've been talking a lot recently about hypocrisy, and the
Mhm.
reason why is that it's so important to understand it, because you're not going to become a hypocrite, but you have to learn how to detect it.
Right.
And then leaders, elite performers, elite leaders, once they learn how to detect it, they then build the type of ecosystem, because you can never make it go away. It's
Yeah.
always, hypocrisy is always going to be there.
Yeah.
As much as you'd like to refine your inner circle and hire and fire people out of your network, there's always going to be some hypocrisy there. So you got to learn to detect it, and then you got to learn how to manage it. And you build your ecosystem where when it is detected, then
Mhm.
it's rejected and kind of disposed of because you don't tolerate it. I see so many organizations that tolerate it. And by just tolerating and allowing the hypocrisy to continue to fester,
Yeah.
what happens, Rhonda, you've probably seen it too, is that you wind up chasing away the elite, the best people, because your culture is toxic to them, and they go across the street to greener pastures, because there are greener pastures, when this happens. So, any
Yeah.
view on that?
Yeah, Brett, I think it's really unfortunate that that is, in fact, what I see a lot of happening. And I am so when
Hmm.
it comes to critical thinking, I am a
Yep.
person that likes to problem solve, right? I want to get in there and uncover and figure out. I know I tell people, I'm sorry if this excites me, but I get a little geeky about this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like there is such an opportunity that's in it. One of the reasons in my experience, that leaders and teams allow hypocrisy um, is because they don't know how to manage it. They don't know what to do with it.
Right.
They don't know
Hmm.
how to call it out in a way that's not going to hurt their organization. And they think that their focus should be on the bottom line. This other stuff will take care of itself. Well, it's like
Right.
having a leak in your roof, Brett. I mean, if you ignore it, the leak doesn't go away,
That's
right?
right.
In
Yeah.
fact, it tends to get worse. And so organizations have to stop. They have to step up. And this is why I love working with senior teams. And sometimes we have to have some challenging and critical conversations around, you can do whatever you want for your organization. That is your right. But let's talk about what you want. Let's talk about where you want to be. And then we can talk about the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And are you willing to do the work that it takes to close that gap? Because not
Hmm.
everyone is. I've been hearing this a lot lately, even around DE and people saying, well, it's very performative and people don't want to do the work. Well, that's okay. They actually have a right not to do the work. We just have to identify whether they want to do the work or not. My goal, my job is to get you to where you want to be. If you don't want to be there, then there's no sense in us going, right? We're not going
Right.
anywhere. So
Hmm.
I want to help organizations say, where is it that you want to be? What's missing in your culture? How do you become that modern magnetic culture that's going to attract the brightest and the best to your organization? And what's that work to your bottom line? How much are you spending in turnover, right? How much are you losing in inefficiencies? And we can talk numbers, but at the end of the day, the organization has to decide where they want to go. And then we focus on helping them get there. And one of the reasons, back to your point, the hypocrisy continues to remain is because they don't know how to navigate it, because that is a skill in and of itself.
It really is, and I think you're right. I think it's wonderful, by the way. Just backing up to something you just said about how you identify where they want to be and where they are, and then you help build the bridge as well. Can you, without revealing any proprietary or private
Mhm.
information with clients, give us an example of something that you've done in a country to kind of help it? Something that one of your proudest moments
Yeah.
doing this work, because every time I see you doing something with teams, I'm proud of you, because it pops out at my screen what you are doing with these people and these leadership teams over a long weekend or 4 or 5
Yeah.
days. And it's amazing. and I'm not even a participant in that. And I'm proud of the work you do because I understand the complexities, but it's a rare skill that you have, and you're a very elite talent. So I'd love to hear maybe
Yeah.
one of the stories that you're most proud of, if you could tell us about that.
Yeah. So, one of the things I'm most proud of, I think, is working in an organization or with an organization in another country. Um, and there were some real cultural variations between what the leaders felt was necessary in terms of practice, policy, procedure, because of their culture, right? So, the leaders would say, well, we do this because this is what our people want and this is what our culture is. Okay, that we'll take that at face value. But then in digging in and doing the work, we talk to people. We ask questions. We ask them how they felt about it. And it turns out that's not what they wanted. So then we had the opportunity to go back to the leaders and say, listen, but we understand that maybe this is where it was in the past, but this is not what we're hearing today. And granted, we haven't talked to every single person that you service in your organization, but here's what we are hearing. Now, the challenge for you as an organization is to figure out, number one, are you willing to make that shift? And then number two, we're here to help and support you in order to do that. That was a tough conversation because it was all about culture. And this is what our culture wants, and this is how we do it here. And you may not understand how it is here, that whole thing. And it's like, but let me just help you with this. This isn't about me, right? I don't work here.
Right.
This isn't about me. This is about what your people and what your clients are telling us that they want, and we're trying to help you gain awareness and understanding as to where that shift has occurred, so that then you as an executive team can take the action to make that happen or not. You can do that with full, awareness. You get to make that decision. But it was a powerful moment, because to listen to the clients and the staff say, well, yeah, this is what we really want, and why can't we do this, and to ask us questions, and then to go back to the leaders to say, you guys kind of missed it on this, and let's talk about how you move forward with the rest of the organization.
I love that, and I think it's especially, it reminds me when I had responsibility for different countries when I was in regional roles, and I'd fly into a country and get through immigration, and the driver would be there to take me to the head office, and then it was going to be marathons of presentations, and I said, take me to a branch,
Hmm.
and there was immediate panic, right? Because I wanted to talk to people on the front line before I went in to see those presentations to see if I could reconcile what I'm about to be told for 8 hours in a boardroom type of setting with what people in the front line facing off with customers felt. And it's just and I think you've described this approach very, very well. So I
Yeah.
love that. I think that's fantastic to go out there and talk to people that are actually doing the work, or the transactions, or the
Mhm.
servicing, or the operations, whatever, to really identify, okay, well, this is what's going on here. And you're right. Your job is to help them get where they
Yeah,
want to be. Do they really want to be there or not? Or do they want to just
exactly.
kind of say, well, it's the culture here? Well, I've heard that one 1,000 times as well. Well, that's Brett's on. That's how we do it here. Well, it reminds me of my first week in Japan, Rhonda. You're not going to
Oh
believe
my
this, but I
goodness.
said, I want to sit in on an interview, and I was brand new to the country and
Mhm.
didn't understand the language, anything like that. And so the HR person was there, I was there, and then we're interviewing a candidate for a senior role. The first question that my HR director asked was, Rhonda, how old are you? And
Oh,
and my background to that point was California,
right.
Sue Happy, California, right? And all of these things, and but in Japan, it's perfectly normal to ask the age and to even put your date of birth on your CV or resume.
Mhm.
But I said, that's the last time that we're going to do this.
Right.
But Brett's on. That's just the way that we do it. I'm sorry, we're an American company. It was Citigroup,
Yep.
Citibank. And I said, we're an American company. We don't discriminate, or we don't use age as a factor in any hiring decision, unless they're a
Right.
minor, obviously, or something like that. We're just not going to do it that way. So I think I love that story you just told, Rhonda. What a great. So did it turn out well? So they embraced things that turned out well?
It was a little bit of Owen and Owen and
Yeah.
but we talked through it, right? We talked through it, and they decided that okay, it's time for us to look at what we decided, Brett, which was really important, is that the senior leaders would work with the team to
Mm,
decide on a path forward rather than having it be a very top heavy approach, right?
right.
And you just dictating how it's going to be, so that you make sure that you maintain connection. So what's
Yeah.
really important, and what I also heard in your example, is when I talk about emotional intelligence, I talk about it from two perspectives.
Hmm.
And we don't often do this. I talk about emotional intelligence from the individual leader perspective, right? Everything begins with you as a leader and how you show up. But I also talk about emotional intelligence from the organizational perspective, because I can be an emotionally intelligent person and make poor decisions organizationally because I'm not tapping into the emotional intelligence principles, right? And
Mm,
so that level of awareness and understanding it has to go beyond you personally and extend into the organization, and wanting to be an aware organization. The examples that we just both share showed a level of a lack of awareness, right? And a lack of
yeah.
understanding, which often
Good
gets us
point.
in trouble. Brett, have you ever played Monopoly where they say stop and do not pass go?
Yes.
Well, in emotional intelligence, that's how I view self awareness and understanding. Stop. Do not pass go until you gain
Yeah.
awareness,
Good point.
self
Mm,
awareness, organizational awareness, and then you can decide what to do next. And that's that critical thinking piece, right? You can decide the next steps only when you have the information that you need to do so effectively.
right. It's not easy, folks, to do this, right? Nobody ever
Right.
said it. Leadership is not easy. It's incredibly rewarding, though, right?
Mhm.
And when you get it right, but when you get it wrong, it's incredibly painful. So, a lot of leaders just need to kind of turn in their keys, and
Right.
maybe they're better as an individual contributor, or to be open-minded to this type of
Yeah.
thinking, and to listen to what Rhonda's saying here, because you can you can flip your organization, the ecosystem, the culture, from a profits before people to people before profits, and it all starts really with emotional intelligence, and
Mhm.
being able to practice these things, and building this magnetic, sorry, what do you call it again, Rhonda?
Yeah, modern magnetic cultures.
Modern magnetic cultures, right, where you attract. Okay,
Right.
that's the magnetic piece, is attract instead of repel
Yes.
top talent, because when you get it wrong, you repel it.
Yep.
And they just look at the United States and what happened during COVID. It was pretty obvious that it's they just ran out the door, and a lot of them didn't come back to work yet. That's going to be changing with inflation coming up, and people are going to go back to work. So leaders now have an opportunity to kind of reshape their culture, where they can attract the best people coming off the sidelines, which are
Yeah,
really good people. Yeah.
absolutely. But
Yeah.
the leaders, there are very few leaders that I give up on and that I say turn in those keys. But
Hmm.
there are some. And the
Yeah.
leaders that I sort of draw that line at are the leaders who believe they have arrived, that there's nothing left for me to learn. I've been doing this for 30 years and I know it all and I've done it
Yeah.
all. I've been doing this for 30 years too. And I'm still learning. I'm still growing. There's still
Yep.
so much. This is an entirely new world. I go to a different culture. I was in Colombia. I learned something there. In fact, my client in Colombia wrote an amazing white paper book, and he shared it with me. Only, and I'd love to read it. Only it's in Spanish, and I've got to figure out how to be able to do that. So, but that is a goal of mine. But I learn something everywhere I go, and I continue to embed and feed that into the practice and the work that I do. So, those leaders who think that there's nothing left for them to learn or gain, that's where I draw the line. For everybody else, I say, when you know better, you do better. Right. I believe
Right.
every leader gets up every day and wants to do their best work. Oftentimes, good leadership has not been role modeled. They don't have effective leadership training and development programs. I get hired. Oh, you're a leader. Great. You should be good. Go make it happen. Or you get the solid skill technician who then they say, you know what? You're amazing at this work. You're the leader. Yes, it makes just perfect sense that we're going to put you in this leadership role. It's like, hey, hold the phone. Where's the training that supports
Right.
this person to be successful in this new huge role of leading people that you've just given them? So
Mhm.
we as organizational leaders have to do a much better job of training, developing, supporting, and holding each other accountable.
I think you're right. Rhonda, people, let's say you've got a great individual contributor and they've done well. So guess what? You're getting a promotion.
Right.
I'm promoting you. And then guess what? So you get your pay raise, you get your grade, you get your title, you get an office or whatever other perks come with it. And then guess what happens? Monday morning rolls around, you come to work, and all of a sudden there's all these problems out there, and you don't know how to you know how to solve them if it were you in an individual contributor.
Right.
But now you've got, I don't know, 12 people that are dependent upon you, and three of them just got sick, and one is pregnant, and two quit. So how do you handle that?
Right.
That's life, right? So you need to arm yourself up with the emotional intelligence to
Mhm.
take care of that, the one that got pregnant, right?
Yep.
And make sure that she feels that secure, and
Mhm.
not to worry about job security when she comes back to work, and that kind of thing. Treat it the right way, do the right thing. Then you've got to figure out, okay, how am I going to cover the work from these three people that quit, right? And
Right.
that kind of thing. They don't know how to do that. you're
They
you're
don't.
spot on about that, right? Yeah.
No, because who teaches us? So I did an informal poll at one
Yeah.
point, and I said, "So who taught you how to be a great leader?" And everybody was like, "No one. I had to just fall and scrape my knee and make mistakes." And
Yeah.
then and one person actually responded. It was so funny. She said, "Not only did no one," she said, "I'm just going to talk about the job I'm in right now. Not only did they not teach me anything about what was expected of me as a leader here, they didn't teach my boss anything either. So she has no idea. She has no idea either. So the both of us are just sort of scrambling, trying to figure it out. We can do, Brett, we can do so much better than that. And it is imperative that we do so.
Yeah, we can exactly. Padre, thanks for your comment on emotional intelligence here, and leader that makes the rules. Great, Rhonda. Yeah, I mean, Rhonda's a specialist in this area, and
Mhm.
when it comes to communication, Rhonda, and you look at applying your emotional intelligence, do you have any views on how, when during times of turbulence,
Yeah.
how do you advise people to communicate with their teams?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, Brett. One of the things that I advise people to do is it's almost what we mentioned a little bit earlier of stop, do not pass go until you gain an understanding. So you need to communicate a message. What's the understanding? The understanding is where are people? What are they feeling? What's happening with them? What are their stresses? What are they thinking? And then, and this is critical, where are you? Right? How are you feeling? What's the emotion and the thought process that you're bringing to this? And this is what I call the golden information. When you have the golden information, which is about what others think, feel, believe, what's happening with them, what you think, feel, believe, what's happening with you, then you've got to make a decision. What do you want? Like, what's your goal? So I tell leaders, one of the reasons we get into trouble is because we just start communicating without being really clear on the goal. I like to use the
Mhm.
example of Facebook recently. had that employee memo that went around and said, hey, we're going to be making some changes. There's probably some people that don't need to be here anyway. And well, what's the goal of that communication? Because I'm thinking if your goal was to piss everybody off and make people feel undervalued and disrespected, then you probably accomplished the goal. I'm not sure that that was the goal. I think there was a lack of thinking and planning and execution in that. So use the information about what's happening with people, what's happening with you, and then decide what do you want? If you're in turbulent times, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to calm the ship? Are you trying to get people to get on board with something? Are you trying to get them to see a new change is necessary? What is it you're trying to do? And I like to call it outcomes based communication. We communicate based on the outcome that we want to achieve. And when you are engaged in outcomes based communication, it keeps you from just going down a rabbit hole and doing and saying something that, and then you go, oh, well, that's not what I intended. Right, because you missed a step, right? And you missed a really important step, and that is identifying a mutually beneficial goal that's going to move the organization forward. When you've got all that information, now you can communicate in a way that encompasses body language, in a way that your tone matches, in a way that is respectful for your team, right? All of those elements come into play so that we can get the outcome that we want. And that's what I advise teams around communication, particularly during turbulent times.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so leaders, the message out here, this outcome based approach to the communication and making sure that you have the information to make the right decisions. Everybody's watching you in the organization. They're all watching, right?
Yeah.
And they're not just listening to what you say. That's part of it. But the other part is they're also watching your actions. And if they don't match, you're a hypocrite.
Yeah.
That's the by definition
Yeah.
hypocrisy. And guess what? It may not be intentional. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
you just don't know how to communicate during a time of crisis. So please engage Rhonda
Yeah.
separately on this because she can help you build this into the ecosystem and the culture so that when that adversity does hit again, and it will hit,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it'll be or when it will be, but you better be ready. But if your ecosystem is prepared for it, it's like driving your car when the sun's out, and guess what? That car will also sustain some bad weather
Right.
as well. It's durable enough. You want that durability built into your ecosystem and culture, and Rhonda
Mm-hmm.
can help you do that. And the best time to do that is when the waters are calm, not
Yes.
in crisis mode, like just a couple of Bud Light, Anheuser-Busch right now is in sheer panic and survival mode because they don't, and I'm not going to
Mhm.
highlight what caused the issue, but the way they have handled it, it's obvious they could benefit by hiring Rhonda because they don't know who their customers are and they also don't know really how to communicate with them, right?
Mhm.
And these things, that's just one that's in the news now. There's tons of others. Every business needs to have this durability built into the ecosystem
Absolutely.
so that they can communicate when that crisis hits, whether it's weather crisis or um, a marketing flop or whatever it is. Just make sure that you're ready to handle that and you know um, how to communicate with your team,
Yeah.
right?
What's really
Yeah.
important about that, Brett, is that so 75% of careers are impacted by emotional intelligence. And you would think for a number that high, we would be talking a lot more about it, right? This is something that is absolutely critical for leaders. The other statistic that's really interesting, and I can't remember the exact number, but the large majority of leaders that lose positions don't lose them for technical skills. It is about emotional intelligence. It is about the human skills. I hate the term soft skills because it makes it sound optional.
Mm.
These are human skills. These are people skills, right? And so the large majority of leaders that lose their jobs do so because of human skills, emotional intelligence. So you've got the technical skills down. That's important. Absolutely. Your IQ, all of that is important. That's baseline. How do you get beyond baseline? Beyond baseline are the human skills. Beyond baseline is emotional intelligence. And we want to be doing much more at imparting and teaching this to the leaders in our organizations.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And I'll just take that a step further. This is critical, folks. What Rhonda just mentioned, and please listen to her. Take the notes. Take some action. Make sure that you're working on this human component, because I'll tell you, when the crisis hits, and I've been through three big ones. You've also got to have a strong adversity quotient. But if
Mhm.
you don't have this stuff down that Rhonda's talking about, you're not going to have a good adversity quotient, because
Yeah,
you're not going to be able to communicate or to make better decisions. And you're probably not going to have tightly engaged relationships, which is also a
mhm.
benefit, right, Rhonda, of
Absolutely.
what you're talking about as well.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
one of the things, so I've been talking a lot about emotional intelligence. I want to just do a bit of level setting, Brett, and just talk about,
Yes.
so what is emotional intelligence?
Yeah.
So emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and recognize emotion in yourself, not only
Hmm.
your emotions, but what's powering those emotions, right? What's the thinking around it? It's also the ability to recognize and manage emotions in others, right? And here's the operative part. Emotional intelligence is about the ability to use that information to generate better results, to improve outcomes, to get better, to have better relationships, right? So, emotional intelligence is about understanding, leveraging, and managing your emotions and emotions of others to the point where you're able to use the information. So I talk to leaders and they'll say, no, we don't want to talk about emotional intelligence. We all do pretty well with managing our emotions. Fantastic. That's really not the core of what emotional intelligence is. You're missing the operative part of it, which is the second piece of it, which is absolutely critical. And the reason I wanted to back up and say that is, at the end of the day, emotional intelligence is a set of skills. It's a set of skills. It's not like IQ. IQ is fixed. By the time you're in your late teenage years, IQ is done. Can't do anything else about that. EQ, or emotional intelligence, is a set of skills, which means you can build it, you can develop it, you can improve it like any other skill. And that includes the skills of building and fostering healthy relationships at home and at work. So that was a long way around coming
No,
back to the
that's
relationship
fantastic. Yeah.
piece. Yeah,
I think you're right, because I think a lot of people struggle with kind of understanding, oh, IQ, EQ, they're
yeah,
all kind of the same, and they're not. And what can you control? You can control that IQ to a certain
right.
level, but that EQ, and that's probably why you said earlier that you never really give up on leaders unless they feel that they've basically learned it all, right? So
Yeah,
because there's
that's
always room to work on this human side,
absolutely. As long as you're willing, right? If you have
right?
an organization that's willing. So I was recently having a conversation with someone in my group. I have a leadership group called Ascension Leaders. It's a complimentary group. You can visit ascensionleaders.com. And we just come together and have conversations about things that are impactful and important to leaders. So we were having a conversation, and one person in our group said, my experience is that it's hard to have difficult conversations with leaders because they're not open to it. They're not receptive. And I said, well, one of the reasons is because we have not gained their agreement. We've not gotten their buy in. They are not okay with you pushing back on them. So the first thing that needs to happen is somebody like me needs to come in and open up that space, right? I tell people, you don't have to be the bad guy. There are people like me out there perfectly willing to come in and be the heavy, right? To
Right.
have those conversations, to unlock and open up that space for leaders to be able to say, this is not a threat against my leadership. She's not challenging me. She's not saying that I don't know how to lead my organization. She's saying that she can help us get something that we want. And there's a value in that. And that begins by opening ourselves up so that our people feel comfortable coming to us and speaking to us and even pushing back.
That's fantastic. And one thing I want to highlight what you just said is to leaders out there, it is not a sign of weakness to bring in a catalyst for change, right? Provided the only requirement is that you support that change and you're going to be behind it all the way, and you're going to do the things that catalyst. You obviously want to get the right person. I'm telling you, Rhonda is one of those right people to do this as well. But it is a sign of strength to do this. Rhonda, what you just said triggered some time that I had. It was off the back of the global financial crisis in the late, prior to 2010, it was probably 2009. And we got the country heads together, my leadership and executive teams from Botswana, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Namibia, and Tanzania. We got them all together at an offsite. And I brought in somebody that does work similar to what you do. His name was Tom Mullen, and may he rest in eternal peace. But Tom came in and he did a transformative workshop with us over 4 days
Mhm.
that completely changed
Yeah.
the way that we operated. It completely changed the way that we measured people, how we defined performance, how we compensated people, how we measured customer centricity, how we measured employee or partner centricity as well on that engagement. And it completely turned everything upside down in 4 days. And we all had agreement when we left on how we were going to go back and communicate it and implement it. And the performance we saw, it wasn't immediate, but in 6 to 12 months, it became very clear. Wow, what is different here? This
Yeah.
feels different. And the performance then, of course, performance always lags the activity. The lagging performance then really, i.e., the profits, really picked up a year and beyond.
That's
So,
an amazing story, Brett.
yeah,
And thank you for sharing it, because I think it just illustrates that number one, there has to be that willingness, right? There has to be that openness. And the changes that organizations are seeking will take time. But it doesn't have to take as much time as people think it's going to take, right? I talk to leaders and they're like, oh, 5 years. It doesn't have to take 5 years. You can start getting immediate
right.
progress. A one step forward is progress, right? A small step that you weren't taking yesterday and you're taking today, that's progress. So that's the other thing that we don't do is we look at the big end goal and we're like, oh, we're so far away. But what about the 5 steps that your team just took? I want to celebrate that. I'm going, yay, team, high five, right? Let's do more, because you're empowering and encouraging, and you're moving that along the spectrum versus just saying, well, we're not there yet. I mean, that's not encouraging. That's not motivating. In fact, I'm probably a little bit frustrated now that we're not there yet, instead of celebrating the progress that we make. So that's a great share.
Yeah, and I can tell you that obviously, there's always the challenge of delivering results in the short
Yep.
term, in the long term. But when you're doing a cultural transformation, you've got to make sure that your stakeholders understand this is going to take a little bit of time here,
Yep.
but here's a roadmap, and you've got to do a roadmap also to kind of show them what does it mean. It doesn't mean that you're going to miss your numbers for 5 years,
Right.
because that's not acceptable, right?
Sure.
You might have to do some SWAT activities, I used to call them, to cover your number while you're changing the organization. We used to go out and hire really, really elite performers that would help us make our numbers,
Yeah.
right? And get the ball in the net. But the majority of the organization, we were then fixing it. And
Yes.
that bought us air cover, had all the credibility that we needed with my superiors. And then we made the changes, and then we didn't need that SWAT team in the future. And then the whole organization then produced much more, and it
Mhm.
was broad based. And that's when you really know that you have a cultural transformation, when you start to get traction and results. But you've got to be able to
Yeah.
design a roadmap and to quantify it and to show, okay, this is the impact this is going to have on our revenue line while we train everybody,
Yes.
using your example earlier, and while we do why we revamped the compensation system and why we changed the way that we measure performance. Maybe we're going to measure
Mhm.
it more sustainably instead of just
Yeah.
what you did yesterday, right? And that type of thing. And that's where professional expertise, folks, can really come in handy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This is what we
Yeah.
do. And I love the having the opportunity to help organizations move forward, because all of us are impacted by the leaders in organizations, right? It doesn't matter if you go into the DMV, doesn't matter where you
Right.
go, we are impacted by some leader, right? So I was in a restaurant, and I'll sort of wrap up with this story. I was at a restaurant, and I just walked in. I was doing a pickup order, and I
Yep.
walked in, and there was a lady who was talking to, she was talking to the server, and she was, I guess, finishing up her meal and paying, and they were in this kind of heated conversation. And so she walked back over, and I was so curious, right? I was like, "Everything okay?" And she goes, "Well, I ordered something, and it wasn't very good, and I sent it back, and I didn't eat it. I sent it back." And she said, "So the manager, this young lady just told me that the manager says, well, we'll take the charge off this time, but we want you to know that next time there's a 2 bite minimum." And I went, "Wait." I said, "That they have bite counters?"
Jeez.
Right? They have actually have people out there counting bites of
Right.
food. And how do you know what 2 bites? So now, me being the analytical mind I am, right? I'm like, okay, I'm gonna, like, is that a big spoon, small spoon? Like, how are you measuring this? And I just thought to myself, this poor leader, again, probably not her fault, probably lack training, lack
Right.
role modeling, right? And so, but we are all in our personal lives and in our professional lives every single day impacted by leaders. And when we don't have strong leaders, it can make a significant difference. In healthcare, which is my background, also, I've seen this show up in many, many different ways. And it can really impact a family when we are not leading from a space of heartfelt and heart-centered leadership. So leadership is I'm passionate about it. It matters to me.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the best leadership that I've seen, and we're talking about culture, you've got it right when everybody in the organization, including managers and non-managers,
Mhm.
are all leaders and
Yeah.
they're all leading, right? Because they're going to take care of that customer problem. You're going to have a problem in any business, right?
Mhm.
And selling is really all about educating and making it easy for people to buy and easier to fix a problem if there's a
Mhm.
problem.
Yeah.
And it's just that simple, right? And so that should be where the bar is. The bar
Mhm.
that I set for an effective culture is really high, and that's the bar where everybody's a leader. Okay, and people may have different responsibility, but basically everybody's a leader. And if we're touching customers, then you've got to, and you've got it right when you can empower your people
Yeah.
to take care of that customer and also take care of the shareholder. You've got it right then. But where organizations fail a lot, Rhonda, I'm sure you've seen this too, is that they build so many rules around that poor
Yep.
employee that's dealing there at the restaurant, right? That their hands are tied and they can't fix it. And that's not their fault, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, you're the customer and it's like that was an awful experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I experienced it recently. I was at a hotel, and
Yeah.
I had to get on a call. It was time for me to check out. I'm like, oh, but I got one more call to do. What time's the latest I can check out? She said 1 o'clock. And I said, my call's not going to end until about 1:30. What can you do for me? And she's like, well, we're supposed to have final checkouts at 1. She said, but I tell you what, I will. What time are you leaving? I said, I'll be out by 1:30, I promise. And she said,
Mm.
okay. Well, I'll just call the housekeepers and let them know that you'll be there for another 30 minutes. Right?
What a
Simple.
difference. What
What
a
a huge
difference that
difference to
makes, right?
me.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
you could have either walked away, got on the airplane,
Right.
and either felt the opposite of what you feel like now,
Yeah,
just based on how they handled that challenge, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leadership matters. It matters.
Leadership matters in all facets of any organization. Rhonda, good. I think we covered the main points that we
Yeah.
committed to everybody. And again, for those of you watching on replay, feel free to tee up anything that you'd like to know more about. Tell us, Rhonda, the best way, and maybe talk this group that you mentioned that you're leading as well. Can anybody join that, or how does that operate?
Yeah, so it's actually a global leadership network.
Hmm.
Anyone can join, whether you are an aspiring leader or an existing leader. And we spend time talking about things that are important for leaders. How do you listen? How do you have a difficult conversation, right? And you can visit ascensionleaders.com. And we're open. It's an open network because it is my contribution back. People don't get me for free, but that group does, right? That is
Okay.
my way of giving back, and just supporting the leaders around the globe who are interested in growing and developing.
So, folks, LinkedIn, I say this a lot, but LinkedIn, it's a learning library to me. I'm a dinosaur, grew up in the 70s, old fashioned library where you go there, you check out a book, and or you can go there and you can read in a quiet. You can't make noise in a library. So LinkedIn is a modern day library. Okay.
Mhm.
This program, 1 hour, there are 50 plus years of combined experience between Rhonda and
Yeah.
myself on concepts that she has shared in multicultural across different cultures, and I've shared a few as well. Things that you won't learn in any book anywhere.
Mhm.
Rhonda just told all of you about another section of the library, which is this group that she has, and so it's free. You can join it, and you can go there to learn, to give and to receive. And so these are things that you should really take advantage of because
Mhm.
they can arm you up. It doesn't take very. How often does this group meet?
We meet twice a month.
Twice a month. So there you
Right.
go. So if you look at all the hours in a month, what is it for an hour?
Yes.
Okay. So it's 2 hours a month, and however many hours in a month, it's a teeny tiny
Yeah.
percent of that. So, and I know what everybody's thinking. Yeah, but there's so many of these things. That's true, but there's not a lot where you can actually go in and talk about these current issues.
Yeah.
So if you're struggling with something, that's a great place to go and communicate the challenges and hear a diverse set of opinions about what you should do. That's where you really get the real value from the
Absolutely.
library, the modern day library. So I think that's
I
great.
love that analogy, Brett.
Yeah.
The modern day library. That's
That's
very
what it
cool.
is, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got some
Absolutely.
in this office that I have. I've got a bunch of old radios, right? And I grew up in the 70s when radio. I mean, there was television, yes, but radio was huge,
Yes.
and I'm a big radio fan, and I'm glad that I was because it really forces you to listen. There's no other way to enjoy radio other
Yes.
than to listen. So if you want to work on your listening skills, folks, turn on the radio because you can't really see it. Anyway, I think everybody knew that. You don't need me to tell you that. Rhonda, thank you for your time today. It's wonderful.
Absolutely.
I appreciate the hour that you've given to my network and your network for this, and I appreciate all that you're doing to help build a stronger leadership community around the globe, and keep shining and keep the energy going. You're really charging my battery, that's for sure. Every time I see something that you're off doing, it really charges me up because I love to see it. The world needs a lot more of that, and I'm much more optimistic about the future, knowing that you're out there doing the type of work that you're doing that will impact people and how they feel. So I think it's
Mhm.
wonderful. So keep up the great job.
Thank you so much for having me, Brett. It's been a pleasure. I can't even believe a whole hour has passed already.
Yeah, it
It
went
was
by
great.
really quick. Yeah, we could probably go for 8, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know that everybody could give us 8. So anyway, but and all of you, you can follow Rhonda. LinkedIn's the best place, and there's also some additional information website information and other social media in the comments.
Mhm.
And if you have any questions about you want to find out more about Rhonda's services, just contact her directly.
Yeah.
And no excuse, because now you've met her, you've heard what she does, and she can really help you transform. But remember, the best time for transformation is when you're not in the middle of a crisis. Then you're
Yes.
more ready for the crisis. But it can also be done in a crisis. Sometimes that's what it takes. But don't wait for that, because
Yeah.
it's a lot more painful to deal with the crisis and then also transform the culture at the same time. So I have done one of those, and it was not easy work. There's a lot of sleepless nights when that happens. But anyway,
Mhm.
Rhonda, thank you again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all for tuning in to this edition of the Packard Network Live. And I think next week the cameras are going down to Sydney, Australia. More on that
Mm.
next week. And I'll be sharing an expert in marketing and branding in today's social media world. So we'll talk a bit about that, give you some great advice that you can all pick up. So thank you all for tuning in live. Thank you all for watching the replay, and I'll look forward to seeing you the next time.
Thank you.